Okay, I think we can start now. So thank you so much, everyone, and welcome. So today you will have the opportunity to learn how to create your own customized GPT assistant. You will discover how the GPT model works, how to train it with your own data, and the different use case for your business. Welcome to Minds and Machine. This is a podcast we're organizing. It's a tech talk event, basically. So stay tuned because we will organize this kind of event um, very often. So let's start the session. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thanks a lot. Okay, before we start, here are some general rules. First of all, please keep your mic muted as we will record this session. So just to make the experience very smooth. And please don't activate your camera because we will share this content on our social media platform. And also don't hesitate to ask any question, but please write it down in the chat. To begin, I wanted to ask you a question today. So we organized a little poll. So I want to know if you are planning to use a ChatGPT for your business. So here is the poll. Okay, now you can answer. Okay, interesting. Okay, so apparently people are curious to know more, but I see that a lot of people are planning to use ChatGPT in the future. That is interesting. Okay, maybe I'm gonna wait just a few seconds. I hope everyone could answer. Some new answers are coming. It's very closed. Interesting. Okay, thanks a lot. So I'm gonna end the poll now. Thank you for your answers. So it's interesting to see that you are curious to know more. So let's move on. So here is the agenda. So we will start with an introduction, then we will explain how the GPT model works, how to train the GPT models with your own data. Then we'll talk about prompt engineering, effective ways of generating responses from GPT. Then you will see a demo. And then we will experience a live application and we will end the session with a Q&A. So about us, I am the marketing manager of Gigalogy. My name is Perrine Meret, and at Gigalogy, we are a user experience first company. We are transforming technology into a better human experience. Just a bit more about us. So we launched the company in January 2020. We're now 23 employees. We are based in Tokyo, Japan. Our CEO is Mosleh Uddin. I will introduce him a bit later. And just a bit more about our products. So basically, we have a recommendation engine platform for e-commerce businesses. We also provide a cloud infrastructure service for immediate deployment of AI models in production environment. And recently, we also launched the MyGPT platform for training and managing GPT models with internal data. And we also provide AI-powered digital advertising delivery management platform. So now I will pass the mic to our CEO, Mosleh Uddin. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Perrine. And hello, everyone. And first of all, I would like to thank you for making the time for this session today. So let me share my screen and continue this talk. All right. So as Perrine also mentioned, we have quite a lot of things to talk about today. First of all, obviously, I will talk about how the GPT model works, and then we'll jump into how we can use our own data to get the most of GPT models. And after that, we'll talk a little bit about how we can build dynamic prompt to, get the most out of it, most out of GPT models as well. We have a live application today. So later we will try it out, and you can also see how your data can be used to build GPT-enabled applications. And finally, we will take some questions. Okay, so first topic today is how the GPT model works. So maybe most of you know that GPT stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer, and it is a type of deep learning model that uses transformer architecture. So if I divided the whole thing into main stages, then we will have 3 stages here. The first one is pre-training, the second one is fine-tuning, and the last one is inference or prediction. So let's take a look at what happens at pre-training stage. So basically, probably this is also very general knowledge as well, that at the pre-training stage, since we call it large language models, this model is trained on large amount of text data from the internet. So probably the entire Wikipedia and most of the public information is out there. So what happens is when you feed that much information to the model, it becomes capable of learning, or it actually learns to predict the next word in a sentence based on the context of previous words. So basically this process, if you continue to do that, this process helps the model to capture patterns, grammars, semantic relationships between words, and so on. So once you have a pre-trained model, that's when the fine-tuning happens. And to be honest, to build a real-world application, fine-tuning is a must. So what fine-tuning means is that you take the pre-trained model and further train it with a more specific approach or with a more specific goal. One example could be you could build a question-answer type of bot or a chat bot for your customer service, where you will probably train it with a bunch of question and answers as your dataset and fine-tune it until it comes to the stage that it gives you a very good answer. The third stage is inference. And inference is actually kind of connected to our previous stage of fine-tuning, because every time you fine-tune it, you probably want to see how it is doing. And then you fine-tune it again, and this iteration of fine-tuning and inference goes on. So basically for GPT model, the inference stage is you ask it a question, and it actually generates an answer based on what it learned so far. We also call it a prompt. So at this stage, the model basically leverages the knowledge that it learned, the pattern it also learned during the training and fine-tuning process, and tries to produce the best answer possible. So one thing really interesting about the GPT model is that I think if you used ChatGPT, is that it is capable of producing human-like answers. Like that is probably the surprising thing. So why it can do that? So the core thing, or the core technology, or the core mechanism that allows the GPT model or GPT-based application to do that is the attention mechanism. So this attention mechanism basically weighs the importance of different words in a sentence. And what it means is that it allows the model to capture long-range dependencies, not just from a specific few words, from the entire course of actions or course of data set, and combines the sentences, find the next word based on the previous word very accurately. Obviously, today I'm not going to get into details about how the attention mechanism works, but I'll just touch it a little bit. So in GPT model, each word in a sentence is actually represented as an embedding vector with its semantic meaning with it. So the model assigns weight to these word embeddings based on their relevance to each other. So that's like a very basic, generalized, simple way to put it. So imagine the model is trying to produce the cat sat on the mat, this sentence. So what it's most likely going to do is put a lot of importance on the word cat and the word mat. And obviously with our human mind, we can probably say, yeah, I know that, of course. Because without the cat, we cannot produce this sentence. Who is gonna sit, right? We cannot say. We cannot even make up this sentence without the cat for this particular sentence. And once we find out the cat, then maybe if the next word is sat, then the obvious choice is, where is this cat going to sit, right? On top of the mat. So obviously with our human mind, it's a very easy thing to do. But if you go back to, if you are not a native English speaker, if you go back to your elementary school time or even far before that, you will probably notice that that's exactly what you did when you try to learn English, like how the sentence structure should be, where should I put the verb, where should I put the nouns, how should I build my sentence structure. So we learned, and then we become able to, write those sentences. So it's really super cool to see that artificial intelligence model can produce this level of intelligent answers from vast amount of knowledge. Okay, so let's take a look at what is ChatGPT, because I think everyone in this call probably at least tried it a few times. There are many different ways to put it, but the way I like to say it is that this is an application that utilizes a fine-tuned model based on the GPT core model. As we just discussed before, that fine-tuning refers to the process of training a pre-trained language model with more specific data, with more specific instructions. So in the case of ChatGPT, it has been fine-tuned in a way that it is really good at interactive tasks and excels in dialogue-based interactions. Obviously, with GPT-4, it can do more than that, but initially that was the start. So what I'm trying to say here is that if we can also train or use this foundation model with our own data in some way, then we can have our own GPT applications focused or, focused on our specific problems. All right, so let's take a look at some use cases of ChatGPT. So obviously, in this list of use cases, I try to put the things that I usually use for ChatGPT. So there are plenty of them, maybe hundreds of them or more. But usually as an engineer myself, I would use it, or I actually use it to check out the meaning of a code snippet sometimes. Obviously, I put a very simple example here, not these sorts of things, more longer and more complicated stuff. Then another thing I often use is, instead of searching for a specific thing, for a specific method of a specific language, I just ask ChatGPT because we sometimes forget how to do a very simple operation. So we can just ask ChatGPT and it will be faster than searching it online. Then obviously, this is something that every engineer probably does in their day-to-day life, that face an error when they're working in an application. And the best part is, if you just pass that error, it's not going to give you a solution. Let me start with that. But it will point you where the problem is happening and some hint on how you can potentially fix it. And that is actually good enough for me, and probably good enough for most of us. Another use case that I often use, and I think this is a very good one, is trying to define the specification of an infrastructure. This is a very good use case, I would say, that because I was very curious how I can host these large language models in our own infrastructure. And I looked it up online a lot, and each of these articles have different opinions. Obviously, they have good points. So I decided to start asking ChatGPT itself to find out what it says. Obviously, it didn't give me any specific answer, but it pointed me to the right direction that I eventually realized that what kind of infrastructure I need to host these sorts of large language models. This is a very general use case. Instead of searching for something online for a very general question, asking GPT always gives a much summarized, better answer. Now, a little bit less technical stuff. Writing product descriptions is something that I have also used ChatGPT. Also, writing press release as well. Okay, great. So now that we saw some of the use cases of ChatGPT, maybe it would be more much nicer to see how we can use our own data to train and build an application with the GPT techniques or GPT models. Today, I'm going to talk about mainly 3 ideas. So the idea A is basically pre-process your data and generate vector embeddings. And then use those vector embeddings and generate response from the GPT models. So let's take a look at how this might look like from the data flow point of view. So imagine you have a lot of training data. Let's say you want to build a customer service bot. That means you have a lot of questions and answers on specific topics. Then you can process those data, convert them into a vector, and usually your vector will look much longer. For simplification, I just put it this way. And you might want to use a database to hold that source of information. So what happens is with this idea that when user asks the question, you can also convert the user's question into a vector and find similar content from your vector database. Get those content. There will be more than one candidate, of course. And then pass the question and most relevant context to the GPT model. And that will allow GPT model to understand, not only understand your question better, but also it will have some context. What is this question about? And some samples of how the answer should be, maybe. And then it will be able to produce a very good answer for you based on your own data. So this is the idea A. Now let's take a look at idea B, and it's more like what we were talking about earlier as well. Let's just fine-tune a GPT model with our own data. So in this process, obviously, once again, you have training data. You probably pre-process it, but the important part is that you need to pre-process it in a way and convert it in a way so that it is suitable for fine-tuning with GPT models. Usually, this training data is actually formatted in a way with a prompt and completion format. So you need to do that. And then you can train OpenAI's Da Vinci model as well. That's one option. I think that's the only option they provide at the moment, but probably they will do more in the future and generate your own version of GPT model. Then you can use that model to answer any questions user might have. The interesting thing is that you don't have to separate the idea A to B. You can even do both ideas together if you want, depending on what kind of problem you are trying to solve. And the third one is actually very similar to the second one, but in this scenario, instead of going with the OpenAI's foundation model, let's pick up the open source model. GPT-J could be one, and there are plenty of others at the moment, and fine-tune it with your own data. Let's take a quick look at the comparison between these ideas. Obviously, I already said some of the good things about each idea, some of the cons as well. For the first one, actually, you don't need to do any long-term training. Like basically, you don't have to like go through those phases. Like you push some data, do the fine-tuning, see the results, and continue this process until you are happy with the outcome. And also, it is super fast to implement the idea A. And if your use case is very simple, then probably idea is good enough for to build a very good application. For idea B, it's relatively more complicated than idea A. But as I said, that you can combine idea A with idea B to make something very powerful. For idea C, obviously you have to build almost everything from scratch. The only thing you get is the open source project. That means you have to host this large language model in your infrastructure. You have to train them in your infrastructure, and they are very expensive. So unless you have a huge use case for your GPT application, maybe idea C is not the option that I usually recommend to anyone. Okay, so now that we learned that how we can train our own data with GPT models, that's not the end of it, actually. How we pass that information to the prompt is also extremely important. So let's take a look at some of the effective ways of, or some of the basically ways of building that prompt. Zero-shot learning. This is the simplest one. In this case, we don't do anything. The large language model basically generates answers from your question. Next, we have few-shot learning. In this prompt engineering technique, what you do is you provide several examples of questions and answers. So what it does is it helps the GPT model to better understand the context of your questions. Your question, if you provide some similar question and answers. And it also helps us, okay, this is how I should reply in this format or in this tone as well. Next, we have chain of thoughts. And this is a mechanism to solve the problem by dividing it into multiple steps. So instead of just, see the question and find the answer, this process will create intermediate steps, as you can see here, and we are calling them thoughts. So I have an example here as well. Let's say you ask the model, how can we reduce plastic waste in our community? Then instead of just, giving it an answer, the first step or first thought would be that let's start by understanding the problem. Why plastic waste is a problem? Second, identifying the sources of the plastic waste. What are the sources that usually generate plastic waste? Then explore potential solutions. So once you understand the problem, once you know the source, then you can probably start exploring some potential solutions for it. And once you have, let's say, a couple of solutions, let's consider the challenges and feasibility of each of these solutions. And then finally, prioritize and develop an action plan. So the good thing about it is like, let's say if I ask this to one of our members in the company, they would probably do the same. That they wouldn't jump into giving me an answer, but we human actually do the same thing. We first try to understand the problem, then try to find the source, identify the source, try to find some options or potential solutions, then kind of look at the pros and cons of each of these solutions. And then finally, we say, okay, looks like option A or option B or option C is good. Let's build an action plan for that. So that is chain of thoughts. And maybe some of you know that ChatGPT uses this technique as an application. Another way of prompt engineering is known as tree of thoughts. It is somewhat similar to chain of thoughts, but instead of just, a series of thoughts, this prompt engineering technique, what we can do is generate a tree of responses. So you send the input, we build 3 thoughts, and we ask the model to pick up one thought from here, and then we generate again a couple of thoughts. Then the model decides which thought to take. Then the model again generates some thoughts, and finally it goes to the output. Or it could be that if the model realizes at this point that this is not the right option, then it will go back and pick up the second best option and continue this process. So in this mechanism, besides the large language model's capability, to do it efficiently, we can use our traditional classical search algorithms here as well. Then we have self-critic mechanism. In this process, your large language model will generate a critic C for your answer A and iteratively improve the answer with that critic. So you have your question, answer, and then you'll generate a critic for it. It's more like that you ask the model, okay, now evaluate the answer. And then with this critic, you generate another answer with this critic. And then this process continues until you find an answer that you are happy with. Obviously, we can do this dynamically. That's the whole point. This is a relatively new way of doing things. I have recently came across it. And in this process, experts prompting, the large language model generates an expert in the domain of the question. So what does it mean, actually, that the large language model generates an expert in the domain of the question? The reason it can do that is because it is already trained in the pre-trained state with huge amount of information. So it basically knows about most of the public information out there and most of the things out there. It knows what should be the good qualities of a math professor. It knows basically all the equations of physics or modern physics. It knows how what is the heat equation. All these informations are online and it actually knows about it. So use your large language model to be an expert in the domain of the question is the idea here. And then use that information as a system role to generate answers. And the last one is collection of thoughts, and it is somewhat unique to us because in this process, we basically took ideas from different approaches, combined them, verified them, and we realized that it gives a really good answer. So for this approach, what we do is that the large language model generates n queries for the question. Let's say you are looking for a shirt. Then the model will actually generate n number of queries that is similar to your question, but more, related to what kind of information you have in your database. Then the model uses these n queries to search your database, basically, considering that it is already vectorized or it's already converted to vectors, vector embeddings. Then the model ranked those solutions, or sorry, those results on their relevance to the original question. After that, we use either chain of thoughts or tree of thoughts mechanism, and GPT generates the response. Then GPT automatically grades its own answers, and you will be surprised if the answer is wrong. In most cases, at least with GPT-4, I find out that it actually corrects its answer by itself. And then we use the expert prompting mechanism to generate the final answer. So you might be wondering, in what kind of scenario do I need to do all these processes dynamically? And then one of the use cases that we recently did is trying to solve really complicated partial differential equation with GPT-4. And in that process, we basically use this mechanism, not all of, most of it. Now let's take a look at how can we solve a very complicated complicated problem with GPT models. So that's the idea, using multiple techniques on multiple stages until the final answer that makes you happy. So your question comes in, obviously you have a nice database with all the information. Then you use the few shots learning technique. I can repeat, the few shot learnings technique is you tell the model, give some examples of question and answers. Then you generate your first version of the answer. You use the GPT-4 to automatically grade it. This could be the idea here. Then you go with the chain of thoughts approach if you are not happy with the answer. Then you do it the same process again. If you are not happy, let's go with this self-critic approach, then grade it again. Finally, use the experts prompting approach. You get your final answer, grade it again, and probably you will be happy. So this is just a demonstration of how you can combine this prompting approach on top of your fine-tuned model or on top of your idea A approach. All right, I think I have talked enough. So let's take a look at the demo. So for this talk today, I prepared a demo that's basically a bot that knows about Gigalogy very well. So just to show you, if you ask ChatGPT, tell me a little bit about Gigalogy's history, this is what you will get, just to make sure that we indeed train the model. Basically, ChatGPT doesn't know anything about Gigalogy. But now let's try to ask our, model some of the sample questions. The first question is, tell me a little bit about Gigalogy's history. So as you can see, Gigalogy was founded in 2020 in Tokyo, Japan. The same year, we also opened office in Dhaka. We released our first product in May 2020. Then the next year, we released the alpha version of our Gigalogy AI platform that we also currently call a personalization platform. We did a few other things, opened up an office in UAE. And this January, we get selected as a finalist in a Silicon Valley Immersion Program. Let's try maybe not all of them, but maybe a couple more. So what are the key strengths of Gigalogy as a company? You can see like it is capable of answering your questions just like ChatGPT. But the difference is now it is doing it based on our own data. Obviously, expertise in personalization, that is to the point. AIOps infrastructure, that is one of our key product. GPT-powered products, that is what we are talking about here today. Nice. Actually, it's very good at answering things. I couldn't say it better than this, actually. Wow, strong company culture. Let's try one more. Why should I apply to Gigalogy? Very cool. I couldn't say it better. So yeah, anyway, so this is a demo of the application. So I think we are done with the talk. So I will pass the microphone to Perrine again, and we can move to the question and answer session. Let me also stop my screen.
Okay, thank you, Mosleh. Let me switch and share my screen again. Just give me a moment, please. Okay, so now I think we can start the Q&A. So please feel free to ask any questions, and don't forget there is no stupid questions at all. So don't hesitate to write down your questions in the chat. Thank you so much. Or if you have any feedback or comment about the session so far. Okay, we have one question. Can you train it to give specific answers to specific questions?
Okay, thank you, Perrine. So if I understood the question correctly, let me first rephrase the question. So I suppose the person who asked the question, he wants the answer to be specific. Let's say if it is a hotel concierge service, where is the swimming pool? The swimming pool is on the 9th floor. So definitely, yes, we can do that. And surprisingly, based on our experience with the training process, most of the time, it finds the answer that is actually most suitable to the question. And another thing we can do is, you'll probably notice, if you ask the same question to ChatGPT today, tomorrow, day after tomorrow, you will find a different version of the answer, right? So we can also control that. What I mean by that is always give the same answer to the same question. So it's something called temperature, and based on the value, the randomness increases when the GPT model tries to answer your question. But what I'm trying to say is that you can even control it to always be, specific about what it answers. So maybe it's not a part of your question, but I would also like to add, when you build these sorts of personalized applications on top of these large language models, sometimes you might also want to say that make sure that the model doesn't answer anything out of my training data, right? You might want to do that. Don't answer from the model's general knowledge. So you can also control that and when you build a GPT-enabled application.
Okay, thank you, Mosleh. We have one more question. So how do we deal with ethical issues and answer that may not be correct ethically, apart from understanding context of the text? Can we make the model understand the ethical side also?
Oh, wow. This is a very good question.
Very interesting.
Can we make the model understand the ethical side? To be honest, can we even teach human ethics? Can we? The answer is no, right? Ethical values come from a lot of things: the environment we grew up, what we think to be true, or what we believe to be true. Religion is a very big factor there as well. So I'm not gonna, change the topic. I'm gonna be specific to your question. But the truth is that what these models are capable of doing is what it learned so far, and it learned a lot, right? Almost most of the public information out there. So when something learned that much, it always have a context for something that the user will ask. And you'll probably notice as well, if you ask ChatGPT as well, and if it is a sensitive topic, it very nicely, gives you an answer saying that I don't want to talk about it in a nice way. I cannot come up with the exact thing that it says, but it usually says that as a large language model or an AI model, I can only give you suggestions on this particular topic, but nothing concrete, nothing that you should follow. You should rather search by yourself and make your own decisions. So when it comes to sensitive issues, or when it comes to ethical topics where there is no correct answer, the AI models, even ChatGPT as well, does the same thing. So when we build our own version of it, let's say we build our own application with large language models, we can also train it that way to avoid these sorts of areas when it tries to answer those questions. But this is a very good question. Maybe I will think about it, and next time we talk again, I will probably have a much better answer.
Is there any other question? Okay, we have two. So we have Locon that is saying, sometimes ChatGPT gives an erroneous answer suggestion, and later it makes an apology and provides the correct, better answer when we ask them again about the issue. Why does it happen? Is it intentionally trained in this way so that user make more interactions? Why didn't it provide the correct answer in the first question?
Right. So actually, that's also something I talked about a little bit today, about the grade yourself, like automated grading. Like, look at your answer, and are you sure that this part of your answer is correct? So I'm going to give you an example too. So one time I asked ChatGPT to give me AWS EC2 instances which are good for accelerated computing, and I was looking for instances that has at least 32 gigabyte of memory, right? So 16 gigabyte of GPU memory, and it gave me a list of instances, and I clearly see, because I know a little bit about AWS instances, I clearly see that one of the options doesn't have 16 gigabyte of memory. And I asked ChatGPT, are you sure this particular types of instance actually has 16 gigabytes of GPU? And then, like you said in your question, it corrected its answer. So I do not have a concrete answer to that, why it happens. It's deep learning, first of all. But my assumption is, if I compare with our own human mind as well, that it learned a lot of things and it generated the best answer possible based on the way it learned or the way it was fine-tuned, and give you the answer, right? But when you ask that, are you sure about this answer? Are you sure this instance has 16 gigabyte of memory? Then it looks back into its knowledge base, what it learned about this particular instance, and it realized that, oh no, actually this instance doesn't have 16 gigabyte of memory. Then it corrects its answer. So I suppose it happens to us as well, humans as well. Sometimes we give it an answer, and if somebody points me out, are you sure this is what you want to say to me about this particular topic? Then I rethink again, and I actually come up with a better answer. So this is actually pretty interesting. We couldn't completely analyze it. I cannot completely explain like in a way that like 2 + 2 = 4 way. But that's my current hypothesis why it happens.
Okay, thanks a lot. So we have 2 more questions. When a chat model gets updated, do you have to retrain it? Retrain, sorry, not retrain.
Okay.
Excuse me.
Okay. So the good thing is that you don't need to retrain the entire model. If you have some new data, then you can only retrain with the new data set. So once you train your model with your initial data, I'm imagining that's when you have the maximum data. And when new data comes in, all you need to do is retrain with the new data on top of the existing fine-tuned model.
Okay. So another question from Saiful. If I train the model by my own data and 1 or 2 months later, I want to delete some of my data from the model and then want to update some of new data, is it possible to do this?
Right. So if you want to add or update some information, then the process will be similar to what I just said earlier, that you have to give those new information and retrain your model on only the new information and retain the model. And about deleting information, probably you could just pass the new information that earlier, this was, let's say earlier we said that Gigalogy was born in January 2020, but now let's say somehow it was not the true case. We want to change it to February 2020. All you need to do is, prepare that new data, train that information, then the model should be able to understand that. And next time you ask it, it will give you the correct answer.
Okay, thank you, Mosleh. So we have Noor that is asking, can the same large language models trained with the same data sets, but with different training techniques, create significant difference in the response quality?
Yes, the answer to that is yes. I also verified that. How you pre-process your data is probably the most important part of generating. Okay, maybe that's not true. One of the most important part, pre-processing of your data, and how you build your prompt. That's probably the 50-50 in terms of ratio. Because if you don't pre-process your data well enough, then with the same data set. So actually, funny thing is that if you give me a data set and we distribute it with 20 people, the exact same data set, I can guarantee the quality of the application will be different in these 20 occasions.
Okay, thanks a lot for your questions. Is there anyone else that wants to ask something? Do you have any feedback or comment on anything?
Yeah, also, guys, you can also ask our bot any questions you want to. Like it's designed to know about Gigalogy. So you can pass your questions, then I can once again share my screen and ask those questions in the remaining time if you have any. Not to me, but to the bot. If you have any questions, feel free to share those as well.
We have Andrea that is saying great presentations. Thanks. Thanks a lot, Andrea.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay, so no more questions apparently. And we have some people that are leaving the call now. Maybe we can just give you an example, mostly asking the bot a question about maybe the learning culture at Gigalogy. That will be interesting.
Okay, sure. Let me share my screen. Okay, could you repeat the question one more time?
Yes, I want to know more about the learning culture at Gigalogy.
Let's see what it says. Interesting. At Gigalogy, we have a strong learning culture that is deeply ingrained in our company values. We believe in continuous learning and growth, both for our employees and the organization as a whole. We provide various opportunities for our team members to enhance their skills and knowledge. One of the key aspects of our learning culture is our employee learning program. This program allows each member of our team to take courses and participate in training sessions to learn new technologies to expand their expertise. Well, maybe our members can validate this answer, whether it's a good answer or not. We are also foster a collaborative environment where knowledge sharing and mentorship are highly valued. So Perrine, what do you think? Is it a good answer? Are you satisfied?
I'm happy with the answer, definitely.
Okay, glad to hear.
Better than what I'd imagined, actually. That is really detailed. That is really interesting.
Oh, okay, wow. Actually, me too, because it was not in my sample question. So I didn't know. I was actually a bit interested as well. What would I see as an answer? Any other questions to the bot or me? Okay, let's try this. It was in my sample question, but I did not try it earlier. I'm curious. What do you think of Gigalogy's future, Mr. Bot? Promising future. Cool. This is also a very good answer. Of course, as a CEO of the company, I would love to see this kind of answer. But just even from a neutral point of view, I think the bot summed it up well based on the context or information we have in our corporate website or other places.
Hey, thank you, Mosleh. So thank you for this Q&A session. I think now we can end the session. So thank you so much for attending our tech talk. It was great to have you all. So here are a few informations about us. And if you scan the QR code, you will access our GPT-enabled solution on our public platform. So feel free to scan it. So thank you so much. And please stay tuned for our following events.
Thank you, everyone, and have a nice evening.
Thanks a lot.